But no, the agents didn't want that. The industry didn't want that because then they couldn't control in the same way. And so then I just keep doubling down because what do I have to lose from it? What I would have to lose is my integrity. What I would have to lose from that is my integrity of knowing that I had a choice as a person that's in a position of power, and everyone is obsessed with proximity to power. I have no interest in having power. The only power that I want to do is to be able to assist in growth and upliftment and in change, you know, and ideally with a community where we have each other's backs in doing that.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Tears were shed, love was shared, joy was realized. This is an unbelievably powerful and conscious chat. I applaud Jaime for opening her heart, sharing her vulnerabilities, both the highs and lows. It takes an incredible human to reveal the deepest parts of themselves, and I'm grateful to share this moment with her. This is unlike any chat you've heard before. It's deeply philosophical, uplifting, and nourishing for the soul. To give a bit of context, we dive into Jaime's career as a supermodel, where she reached the highest levels of success while being in her teens, and ultimately left due to the horrors of the industry. Jaime speaks about her transition into filmmaking, which was an unheard of move at the time. Her New York Times article became the catalyst for change in the fashion industry. This is a move that will positively impact the entire industry for generations to come. Okay, so let's get into it. Jaime King is an actor, producer, writer, activist, and ex-supermodel. She made her debut in Daniel Waters' Happy Campers, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. Following her debut acting role, she starred opposite Johnny Depp in Blow, followed by Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor, starring opposite Ben Affleck, Keenan, Ivory, Wayans, White Chicks, Robert Rodriguez's Sin City, DJ Caruso's Two for the Money, starring opposite Al Pacino, Matthew McConaughey, Frank Miller's The Spirit, starring opposite Samuel L. Jackson and Scarlett Johansson, Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, starring opposite Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Josh Brolin, to name a few. Additionally, Jaime was also a series regular on the show Heart of Dixie for 4 seasons, starring opposite Rachel Bilson. Some of her other credits include the Sundance Film Festival premiering Bitch, Escape Plan 2 and Escape Plan 3, and an amazing cameo in Ocean's 8. Jaime's also lent her voice to a number of projects such as Transformers, Power of the Primes, and Star Wars The Clone Wars. Jaime can currently be seen in the critically acclaimed and #1 series Black Summer on Netflix for Season 1 and Season 2, Out of Death, starring opposite Bruce Willis, which is currently streaming on Hulu, Codename Banshee, starring opposite Antonio Banderas, which is also streaming on Hulu, The Resurrection of Charles Manson, starring opposite Frank Grillo, as well as Hoax, The Kidnapping of Sherry Papini for Lifetime. Jaime also recently wrapped shooting the feature film Lights Out, starring opposite Frank Grillo, Dermot Mulroney, and Scott Adkins. Jaime was also one of the top international supermodels and worked on the runway alongside models such as Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss, as well as designers Alexander McQueen and Karl Lagerfeld, just to name a few. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about being a supermodel in her teens and leaving the industry, spiritual science and psychology, being a political pawn for the war on drugs, personal shifts and being of service mentality, her PhD on forgiveness, integrity, truth, our body's compass, paving the way for change, fear, rising above, and a love of filmmaking. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. I've been thinking about this for a while, and this could be an interesting place to start. But I don't know if it's true. Are you an ordained minister?
Yes.
Oh, can you tell me about that and what got you into that?
How do you know these things?
I'm very well researched. I know everything.
Yes. I went to school starting when I was 19 years old. I was ordained when I was 24.
Oh, wow.
I have my master's and doctors in spiritual science and psychology.
Very cool.
And I am very dedicated to the spirit and to being of service. That's really what I'm here to do.
I love this.
It's kind of crazy that you even know that, because I don't talk about it. Because when you use like words of like in Hollywood or minister or whatever, like people get freaked out because they think it's too religious, or they think that it's like something online that you just did to marry a friend, like randomly. But this is not what it was for me.
Do you mind what led you to it? Why did you decide to study it?
I started to study it honestly because the love of my life died when I was young. His name was David Sorrenti. He had thalassemia, a really rare form of sickle cell anemia. And, in the press and things like that, it was declared as something very different. They said that he had died from drugs, which was not true. President Clinton put us on the news.
I know, crazy.
Heroin peak or whatever, taking our very sacred artwork and, exposing teenagers to something like a stamp of something that really wasn't honest, and to be like a poster child of something that wasn't true, that was really scary. When he passed, I started having very extreme anxiety attacks. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what it was to feel like I was going to have like a heart attack. I was 17 years old. Mm. And there was this moment because they wanted me to, I spoke to therapists and this and that, and they wanted to medicate me, and I didn't want to be medicated because I couldn't even take an Advil until I was 28 years old. I thought that everything that I put inside of me could possibly kill me.
Oh, wow.
And even when I got my first film, I almost backed out of it because I was like, there's not going to be a hospital within these X many blocks. And I was on St. Mark Street, and I was coming up to like the second in St. Mark's, right? No, yeah. Second in St. Mark's. And I was like stuck in my tracks because all of these people were getting the cabs, right? Cabs. And it was hustle and bustle. It was very early in the morning, and they were getting coffee and eating bagels. And I didn't understand. I truly didn't understand that the world could keep moving like that. Really. I didn't understand when that which I loved the most was what felt robbed from me, at a very young age, that I never knew because I'd never experienced it, obviously. So
yeah,
I remember getting to the corner of the street, and I was like, fuck it. Like if there's a God, like if there's truly a fucking God, then show me. And if there's not, then just take me. Like, what am I here for? Like, what is this about? Because again, at that age, I'm still an adolescent, you know, and then you're exposed as an adolescent, right? A child on the news with the president of the United States of America not even telling the truth, you know, and seeing the person again that you loved the most, that was not only your partner but your best friend, and their family. And at that time there wasn't like internet. You couldn't like pop on an Instagram and make a statement, or on Twitter, right? I ended up going to a bookstore and I found a book called Spiritual Warrior. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like very, very cynical. I was cynical at that time because I was in so much pain, you know. And again, people are getting bagels and getting coffee and taking cabs, and it's like there's no timestamp for grief. It's like people expect you to get over something that you haven't even processed, even within a week. And I think that's really, it's uneducated.
Definitely.
And I saw this book. It was a New York Times bestseller. And on the back of it had quotes from people that I really respect, Ariana Huffington, et cetera, et cetera. And I brought this book home and I started reading it, and I was like, you know what do I have to lose at this point? I really just asked the sky like a crazy person. Like imagine being on the corner of the street being like, as a kid, like, okay, God, if there's a reason for being here, then tell me. If not, just like take me, because this sucks really bad, you know? It's so funny to me how things sound like a movie, like in retrospect, but they actually happen, you know? So I read this book, and it basically in the beginning it said something to the effect of like, if you read this and believe it without testing it out for yourself, then you're an idiot.
That's a powerful.
And it was like this punk rock line that I was like, oh, okay, I can feel this. That's what kept me going, right? Yeah. And there was discipline in it, and that book changed my life. And from that was the thing that really, like, these tools are the things that nourish me. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's like, if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then let it go. You know, We're not here to be missionaries. We're not here to tell people what to do. You know, it's like unless we experience it for ourselves, it can never really be true. And once you experience it, then no one can take that knowledge away from you.
Yeah.
And that's the greatest gift.
We all have individual journeys. We're all unique, and what works, as you said, for someone might not necessarily work for us, and vice versa. And I'm so glad that you can find it in that moment. And, you know, I don't have the vocabulary to express what you were going through, but, you know, intense grief, being used as a political pawn, blaming your, the love of your life on drugs and all of this stuff. You know, you're so young, and, you know, in that moment, it takes a lot of courage, bravery. You know, spiritual warrior is probably what I would call you as well. And then you find this book, and, you know, you had an open mind, because there's no judgment whatsoever to anyone out there. In a moment like that, everything will seem lost. And, you know, you still put your hand up, and, you know, you decided to actually walk a path, an authentic path, and decide to, you know, try and do the best that you could, which I think is phenomenal. It's an inspiring story for all. Were there any, I know you've been on this journey for a while since you read this book, but I was so excited. I think I heard that once you started reading it, your panic attack stopped, or something along those lines. That would have been so interesting to observe.
Yes, I remember calling my manager, and I was so lucky because I had been cast in a film called Happy Campers, and it was written by Daniel Waters, who wrote one of my favorite films called Heathers. And I auditioned for it, 6 times. And the filmmaker and writer, Daniel, said that he had written it because of an image that he saw of me, right?
Ooh.
And that's how he knew I was this character. And it's essentially, you know, his rendition of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So I worked really hard for that. It was Denise Novi, one of the most prolific casting directors, and Mike DeLuca, again, one of the most prolific producers, that had hired me for that, as well as Daniel. And I was 19, and I then got really, really scared because I didn't know what would happen when I went to Hendersonville in North Carolina, right? I didn't know what would happen, and if there wasn't a hospital, nearby, because I was having such, intense anxiety. And I just kept meditating. I kept praying and meditating, doing freeform writing and working on my craft. And it was like something shifted.
Wow.
Like it shifted from, and that was over a year and a half that I was working on that, like on myself. And it shifted enough to the point where I could get on an airplane and go to this set. But I remember calling my manager and being like, I'm going to fuck it up. Oh my God, I can't do it. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, he's like, this, you're meant to, no. And I chose into myself, right? I chose into myself. And it was the actors around me. It was the actors, and it was Daniel and Denise and Mike. It was the crew around me that helped me, not just helped me, but truly ushered me into a feeling of safety and sense of security. Cool. I remember when they called action. I'd never been on a set before. They called action, and then I looked at Justin Long. I was like, "What do I do?" And he's like, "You act." I didn't know. And there were all these like majestic, magical moments of like, I remember props gave me a grocery bag, a brown paper bag filled with groceries, and it made no sound. And I was like, oh my God, it's like Houdini. What is happening here? What's wrong with this bag? And like, no, this is like, it was revealed to me all the magic of our crew and all of the cast and how things are made and their innate support, even if they didn't know what I was experiencing internally, because they didn't, but they probably did, because artists are innately attuned to one another. And either way, the most important thing about being on a set is that, the crew is your family, and the cast hopefully is your family as well,
Yeah.
And I was very lucky to end up, in the middle of the woods with brilliant artists that, where we all like had cabins next to each other. Thank God for Justin Long. Otherwise I wouldn't know how to drive, and have this really beautiful experience. And it was the combination of my choosing into the work, is spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, meaning with, chanting, with freeform writing, with, having discipline, internal discipline. And I truly believe that the internal discipline reflects the external. And if there's no external discipline, then there's very likely no internal discipline. And somehow, the right people do come along. And thank God for these crafts, because I have a place to take something that is so deeply painful and raw, and through alchemy, put it back out into the world in a clean way.
Oh.
In a clean way. Not dumping on people, not putting my shit on them, but utilizing my awareness to connect to the character, which is, there's no such thing as playing a character, in my opinion.
Interesting.
You
emulate that?
It's emerging.
Yeah.
Right? To really tell the truth is to understand the truth of the character, and to understand your own truth, and to merge them in a very sacred way, right? It's about the merging of that, because anyone can just act as if, but people know the difference, right? Like they know the difference. If I'm just playing at something, it doesn't mean that I necessarily respect the depths in which I have to go to show an audience what that person, not a character, person is going through, you know, and it really is the most beautiful craft to me because I grew up feeling less alone because of it.
Okay, well, I have so many points, and I love the alchemy bit of like transmuting it into love. Well, that's how I hear it. But also, maybe taking a step back to get into acting, which is a phenomenal, obviously, you know, a great decision by you. I also find it so intriguing that, you know, you were a supermodel and people typically, inverted commas, stayed in their lane, which I hate that terminology. But you decided to break out of it and, you know, pursue acting when it was never done before. And despite probably people saying, don't do this, or maybe calling you names, you probably got agents and managers gaslighting you.
Yes.
You know,
Big
because
time.
yeah, I'm just gonna, you just tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'm just assuming, and which is probably not the best way to go about
You're
it.
extremely accurate, and that's it's kind of blowing my mind right now.
But also, I was just, because it would be like a low, maybe like low consciousness as well. They might feel like they're not getting money anymore and they can control you. And I know there would definitely have been control going through,
That's
especially
exactly
at a
it.
young age. And
Yeah.
all of that, all of those doubts. And then there's probably a part of you, you knew that you wanted to do this, but there's still probably a part of you that would listen because we're human, even though you still went on your path. And despite all of that noise, you know, you've even talked about the political stuff and, you know, the loss of your loved one. Despite all of this, also a lot of money, and, you know, you're not corrupted by money, which is a great thing. Despite all of that, you're like, you know what? I want to do acting. And not only have you done acting, done producing, directing, and writing, but you had the foresight to realize, you know, this is actually something I want to do. Can you talk me through that? Because that's just such a great decision, and it would have been very challenging to say the least.
There is something that I think that people are born with, which is a knowingness of what they need to do. And I know this may sound esoteric, and that's okay, because I'll get into the practical steps afterwards.
Yep.
But it's bigger than you, you know, it's or than me in my experience. I knew that I had to be an artist. I didn't have, I knew that I was an artist. And artists sustained me since I was born, you know, a song, a film, you know, photography, Nan Golden, I can go on and on and on. You know, but that was a thing that really held me and carried me. And when you're told from a very young age by societal norms that you're weird or you're strange or all this stuff, and you keep doing it because you can't not do anything else, and then it's like you're like, okay, I'm going to play this part, and they still are like, you're lame and you suck. It's like, okay, you know, it's an ability, I think, to it's like a protest that you don't even want to join. It's like a protest by default.
Yes.
And there, you know, when I was younger, I was obsessed with supermodels, and I was obsessed with fashion, and most importantly, photography and film and music. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I didn't have access to a lot of things because I grew up in Nebraska. There was no internet at that time, and I came across, you know, it was the work of Nan Golden, and I begged my mom to save money so I could go to a big city so that I could get Nan Golden's book, which is called The Ballad of Sexual Dependency, and to see the Martha Graham studio for dance. And somehow that miracle happened again. I think that was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. Oh, and I wanted a real croissant because I thought real croissants were not from Nebraska. I thought you had a fancy place and then you get a real croissant. And side note about the croissant, I carried that freaking croissant on my lap from Chicago to Omaha, Nebraska. Wake up in the morning, it's gone. And my dad was like, yeah, I ate it. It was just a croissant. And I thought it was this magical croissant that was going to lead me into a portal of like, no. But I got my book and I got to see, one of my favorite choreographers and dancers. And um, yeah, I always, there's somehow something else that guides me.
Yep.
It's not only my own heart. It's when I say it's bigger than me, it's not to be weird or whatever. It's just like there's a movement of the soul that happens when you're an artist.
Yes.
And whenever I would hit a point in which I was not learning anything anymore, I was in anguish. I was in pain. And most people couldn't understand that. Because I'd have to I need to master another thing and another thing. And the mastery is not for people's perspective or what they want me to be. The mastery is like this in my own soul, right? And it's never ending.
Yep.
And so once I feel like I've learned everything that I can from that particular subject or thing, then I need to move along to the rest. And it was always my intention since I was little to be a filmmaker. And I just had to figure out a way to do it with, gender norms and, again, societal norms and, not coming from money norms, and just flow with it, really. But it has to have that. I had to have that very clear intention, right? The intention is also bigger than me. The intention of the heart, my heart, is so clear that it's like,
awesome.
It doesn't matter if someone is going to say that I'm a crazy person for quitting my job when I was making millions of dollars.
Wow.
At 17 years old, right? What are you doing? You're crazy. It didn't matter to me. Why? Because I'd saved that money. Why did I save that money? Because I wanted to do something else. And when they're saying, oh, you can't do that other thing, no one's ever done that before, it's like, so what? I'm going to make it fucking happen because this is the truth. And I want to be of service in this way and I won't be happy. So nothing anybody said to me, no matter what manipulation, what threat or what attempt to control ultimately didn't work because I'm a fucking rebel, which is a blessing and a curse,
There's still it's one thing to have that knowing, and it's so awesome to hear you explain it in that way because we all have like an inner compass too. Everyone's got it. And despite having that knowing, which was, it sounds like it was just ringing so true to you. We spoke about all of the, let's say, the outside noise. We all do this. I do this. Sometimes we know something, but for whatever reasons, we want to conform to society. We have, you're very young at that age, and you've got all of these people that are like supposed to be looking out for you. And so we can just kind of like gaslight ourselves, even though the society's gaslighting us. And we can ignore, and we all do this. We've seen this all throughout history and of everyone. But despite that, you still allowed yourself to I say like murky waters. Despite that, you still kind of walked your path, walked forward despite all of that. That's really interesting. Was it just like you're going to do it no matter what? Nothing can stop you? Like, I'm very like proud of you, but also surprised that a human can do that, especially at a young age with so much external noise. That's just so empowering to me.
Thank you. What I experienced it as and continually do is the way I observe things in the micro and the macro. And when I really see things in the macro and the micro at the same time, it becomes survival. And to not share my heart and what I believe is true service because it's not, I don't mean unforgivable, but I can't not do that.
Yep.
And so it's like a sword of truth. And then when you realize that you're a commodity and that the people that love you the most are making percentages off of you, whilst instead of getting angry about it, you just accept that that's facts. You know, I mean, I haven't had many people in my life that truly love me without them getting 10% of my checks. And so when I do have people that do, it's extraordinary. And that's also a big part of my devotion of how I put things out in the world and how I participate in the world, because you know, I say this over and over. My job is to make people feel less alone.
Oh, that's such a good mission.
You know, and not by force, but in a way to pose questions through the art. I mean, I know what people want from me in terms of business. I started so young. I know that, and it's very heartbreaking, and it's very hard, challenging to know who loves you for. You know what the question that came up to me the other day was like, when was the last time that someone met me, truly met me, that knew nothing about me and didn't want anything from me? Like completely unadulterated, completely. And especially now in a world of this, you know, technology and this and that and the other, right? It's like, really, really when, you know, it's a very strange experience.
Can only imagine.
And I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just trying to be
you.
You know, me.
How do you, because, you know, we have different realities in that sense where, you know, you can just Google you and there's a lot. What was kind of like the answer to that question that you posed?
The question about who really loves me was
Or
the answer.
like the last time someone like, or how I see is like the last someone saw you for you and just you, and not, you know, you talked about the 10% checks and all, wanting something potentially materialistic.
I think I'm still pondering that, but I would say my teacher who has passed, Elizabeth Kemp, I would say her students as well. I would say my partner, my children.
That's nice.
That's the ultimate, like that's the ultimate thing. And honestly, here's the thing that has changed my perspective on this is that my manager, Oren Siegel, has is the only, and Bob Myman, my lawyer that I've had for 20 years. Those are the two people that I've worked with in business that actually care about my life beyond a paycheck, to the point where I'm not taking a check. Like we won't take a check. Like through ups and downs and ins and outs, and that's really, you
that's
know,
high integrity as well.
To say that I have that many people is a gift, you know, and it took many months. Well, I said it was just the other day, but I mean, I think about things for a long time, and I kind of do these like scientific studies about it. When was that question? It was like almost a year ago. And then I'm just collecting information for myself and
then analyzing through that. We've had some dealings with Oren, and he has been delightful to work with. So I'm very glad that you've got that. Yeah.
Oh, good.
And, you know, it is interesting because, you know, in your space, you know, without getting too deep into it, you do have your manager, you've got your agents, your managers, there's lawyers, maybe there's publicists, there's other people. Once again, apologies because it's logged out. So just give me a sec.
You said we can't say. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you for calling me out on that. I appreciate it. You know, you've got all these people where, you know, there is that financial relationship, but to see you for who you are and actually care about you, we don't always hear about these things. And I'm glad that you've got that. You know, it takes two to tango, obviously, but it's so nice that you've got someone that genuinely cares for you. Because we have had, and you know, you brought this up as well, we have had on this podcast, and I'm not just talking about agents or managers or lawyers or publicists, in all aspects of life, we do have, or we may have had people or come across people in our lives that want us for something. And it sounds
Girl,
like you've kind of got like a sixth sense, given that, you know, you dealt with this at such an early age where you can kind of weed people out and like kind
I
of.
wish I did have a sixth sense, my friend.
No, it sounds like
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
But maybe that's because I'm very loyal. And then once I recognize that I'm transactional, it's it's hard for me to let go of it because I feel like I'm going to be abandoned.
Interesting. Where do you think that like emulates from?
Mm. Like most people, childhood. And then when you realize that that a majority of people are near you, not because of who you are, but well, because of who you are, but when you don't fall in line with what they want, and that they cannot possess you or own you, um, that when they say that they understand, that they really understand, and then in those moments of the real need for understanding, you have to bear their emotional feelings about even stating how you feel. You're babysitting their own emotional response to it. Like if I was like, I had a really challenging day and I'm just telling you the truth, then it's like, oh my God. Then it's like you get more and more quiet because then you're dealing with their emotional response
Okay.
to how they feel about you having a bad day rather than them holding this space of being like, okay, let me be a sounding board and let me support you in this rather than immediately trying to tell you what to do, give you advice, or direct you. Because that's to me, completely irrelevant when you're sharing something. Being a sounding board for someone, and it's something I talk about all the time. It's like when I speak to someone and they want to share with me something that's very private and what they're experiencing on that day, whatever it is, it's like I'm very reticent to give someone advice. When you hold this space and just listen, most people just need to be heard. And the more they talk and the more you don't say anything, the more they talk and you don't say anything, they come to the conclusion and the solution on their own, which is the most empowering thing, rather than me out of my ego trying to say what they should do, because that's not really active listening.
100%. Okay, I needed to hear that. This is something that I've slowly been learning because, like someone asks you advice, I used to 100% be on the other end, be like, you need to do this, this, and this. And my girlfriend's called me out on this over the years. I'm getting a lot better. But you're right. The capacity for just hearing someone, being in that space, not judging them, hearing them. We all have this innate knowing. We don't need a guru. We don't need someone else to tell us what to do. We know. We have that within us. We can have people help and guide us. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. But so that's also how I learn, is that sounding board. I need to talk out things and then I come to the like realization of whatever it is. It is so important. And it goes back to, what we've been saying, like we are our own masters.
The most important thing.
Yeah.
And for me, if I could say anything, that is the most important thing that I've learned in this life, of how to be of support.
And this is a loaded question, so we'll see where we go. Has this been something that you've learned through your experiences? Was there a catalyst, or you've just seen that when you create that space for someone, typically good things, it's all good, but something magical happens in that space?
I've never wanted to be a missionary. As someone that typically rejects what's forced upon me, I know that forceful nature of attempting to tell someone what they believe, what they should feel, how to go about something, to not really hear them if it's not aligned with the societal gender norms, because ultimately it feels too uncomfy for the person that's hearing it. So then they want to demand, in a way, and through their own hubris, right? When someone comes to you, and when I say you, it's not you.
Yeah.
When someone comes to someone and starts to share what I have experienced from the very beginning of my life, is that that person is already thinking about what they want to say as you are talking. They're not even listening. And so that is not in support of a person's experience or really what they need. That's just so that they can feel good about themselves. And honestly, that's perfectly natural, right? That's perfectly natural. Unless since birth you are really taught about what it means to be actively listening, to have patience, to strip oneself of whatever, constructs or an intergenerational patterning. I mean, that's a tall order, right? That's a tall order.
Yep.
I think it's just that I really understand people that most people don't like.
You see them, you see their soul, you see.
I see everyone. I believe I do see, as much truth as I can. Obviously, we all have our own karma, and there's situational environments, et cetera, et cetera. But the things that most people hate about other people, I'm not just willing to accept. And I think that every human being should have the opportunity to be heard honestly, and it is a loaded question, but that's okay. I don't mind that part. And what part of that question have I not answered?
No, you've answered it. You've done well. I'm extra intrigued in this, searching for truth. And actually, just on that, also, this is something that, it's taken me a while to learn and still something I'm learning. You mentioned like seeing someone. We all have, negative aspects, positive aspects. We've all got a shadow. And, based on what you're saying, to be able to, accept and see that within someone is really important because, a lot of people like to go, I'm a good person. And they don't acknowledge that, there's good and bad. It's what we decide to do with that. And, we've all made mistakes. We've all done certain things. But to recognize that, we're on this journey and we're striving to be the best that we can be, which is obviously something you emulate. But also to recognize that, going on a bit of a tangent, but when, let's just say I'm angry about someone of how they've reacted, often it's a mirror towards how I've been acting. And we don't talk about that. Like we go, oh, this person was rude, they yelled. And yeah, maybe that's true, but why am I being so triggered? Obviously, I don't want them to be rude to me or someone else, but there's an element within us. And if we could look at that mirror to see, why do I dislike this person, but for example, my girlfriend doesn't or my friend doesn't? There's an element of something within us that can, maybe needs to be healed or we need to work on. I think that is such a crucial point as well. And yeah, thank you for, is it something that you think about as well?
Absolutely concur with everything that you're saying.
Yes. Okay. So in terms of,
and that is, again, one of the most important things to recognize.
Well, it brings more compassion to the world because, we always focus, and we're not going to get into politics whatsoever, but we always focus on
politics if you want them down.
We always focus. I'm all about, elevating someone to reach their highest level of consciousness and feeling the highest.
Well, what you're talking about right there, right? Even with what you said about, okay, why is my girlfriend not responding this way? Da, 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 da. It's, I say it this way. It's a matter of good housekeeping.
Okay.
It's a matter of good housekeeping. What do I mean by that? By when we have, let's say, a charge towards something or an experience, like when our thing is like, oh, like when we're charged or triggered by something, we got to take a look at that, right? That's when kinesiology can come in and be really beneficial.
Yep.
Okay. Very much beneficial. Okay. Is it me? Is it a male? Is it a female? Is it that like we can use muscle testing for those things.
Oh, this is so exciting.
Yeah. And it takes discipline to be willing to do that, right? Because again, energy follows thought. And when there is a charge, what was this thing they taught me in school that I love so much? It's the reaction to the solutions, the relation to the issue. Basically, it's something like the relation to the issue is the issue itself, or the reaction to the issue is the issue itself. I mean, like, I'll get the exact words. They'll come back to me. How we relate to the issue is the issue itself.
Interesting. Can you expand?
That like blew my mind. How we relate to the issue is the issue itself. So when you're stating, okay, you have or I have a response to a person, a situation, an environment, something that happened, whatever it is, right? How we relate, how I relate to that response of how I feel inside of myself is the issue itself. It means I have to do the work inside of myself. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, you know, I'm just like reflecting on like different experiences I've had in my life and how, you know, why is someone not triggered? Why am I triggered? It all comes down to our own stuff. And, you know, it's, to me, it's a great sign. That's something I need to work on. And
we all do. And that's continuous. Like just, you know, for anyone, it's like something that's practical. It's like, okay, if someone's driving super fucking slow in front of you and it's like, oh, like, dude, or like too fast, you know, and it's how am I relating to that issue is the issue itself. Is it because it's actually physically dangerous? Is it because I'm just not in the mood to deal with it? Is it because I'm lacking compassion? Is it because that person needs to be somewhere else very quickly for some emergency? Is it that I'm, you know, it could be a multitude of things. But the beautiful thing about, you know, learning and growing, expanding is that we get into these nuances of it, right? And I think that's why kinesiology is a really important tool. And again, good housekeeping. And it's, no matter how we react, it's about forgiveness.
agreed. And also on the kinesiology side, why I love it is that through my kinesiology, I know there's like probably over 50. It's all about looking at belief systems, what serves you and what doesn't serve you. And it can be quite confronting because we all have, let's call it programming. We all have negative program. We've got a lot of positive programming. And, you know, often these belief systems are formed by, I think, the age of 7, or I'm sure that would change in a few years when we find out more about it. But figuring out,
the veil drops at 7.
Okay, so then maybe it is 7 years.
I think it even goes back to the womb, but you could do some, like, look into that inside of yourself and see, like, what you think. That's just what I've...
Yeah, I know. I agree. I agree.
You know?
And just to look at belief systems, some are so confronting, some we don't want to hear, but that's kind of the beauty of it is like, why don't we want to hear it? Why don't we? Like, I love it when I get homework and does something spring to mind? I love it.
Oh no, like it, literally just what you said. I really recognize what you're saying, and I feel that way.
I don't know why this springs to mind, but I'll just say it anyway, and we'll see. You know, kind of. There's so many examples, but I was given a great example when I first started studying. This one lady, she wasn't healing. I think she broke her arm or broke her leg, and she kept on trying to, you know, get it fixed, and it was not healing. And then I think she saw a kinesiologist, and the kinesiologist said, you have a belief system. You actually don't want to get better. And she's like, why? Of course I want to get better. And they dive in and they use the different techniques. And I believe it's because, you know, she had her grandchildren, she had her husband, she had her children all come and look out for her and want to spend time with her. And she wasn't getting that before. And then when she had that realization.
What arm was it? Do you know if it was her right or left arm?
No, but I know there's different connotations on
it. Continue. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd love to know that. I only heard this from a second point. It wasn't through my experience. And it was just the example that they gave is that she loved having a broken arm or leg or whatever it is. I'm sorry that I've forgotten, because it meant that her children, her grandchildren, her husband would spend more time with her. And she just wanted that. And so that's potentially a negative, and potentially, obviously, we want to heal in the healthiest way possible, but it allowed her to spend time. So when she figured that out, she could still spend time with her loved ones, but also allow herself to heal. And it's just things like this which really excite me, because we know so little about the subconscious and what it can do. Yeah. I'm sure you would have had billions of experiences, you know, also doing psychology and spiritual science. I'm sure that your mind gets blown all the time in seeing this because it's completely out of this realm. It might be a bit weird for some people, and that's okay.
That's the thing. That's why it's such a joy to talk to you about it, because it's not something like even the fact that you knew that is like a big deal. It's not something, you know, I mean, with the people closest to me, yes, but even with the people closest to me, I don't even practice with those people.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm the same. I don't
You know?
discuss this with everyone or do it with everyone. It's whoever wants to.
That's that what you just shared with me. You know, the reason why I asked if it was like right or left is because the right side is masculine polarity.
Yeah.
And my left side is feminine polarity. And it's also, you know, the idea of arms and hands.
Oh,
And even if you look, you know, in terms of archetypes, women lead typically with their hands
interesting.
and their arms. And so if something happens to the arm or the leg, whatever that is, like
Yeah.
think of like
I think it was the arm, but yeah.
don't have a leg to stand on. You know, they like something with the back, monkey on the back, you know, like that. Like if you think about like what I do is I think about, you know, with arms outstretched, it's like how much is someone giving that's not being reciprocated.
Oh, interesting. You know, the balance and giving and receiving.
Giving and receiving. And again, especially for women, it's typically from, you know, or if we're talking about something with the throat, you know, what are we sharing? What are we not sharing? What do we feel oppressed in sharing? What are we afraid of in terms of communication? I mean, with every area of the body, you know, as I'm sure you know.
What talks to us.
Yes, exactly.
And
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Once we can kind of learn, you know, a lot of people talk, well, I do especially talk about that gut reaction or, you know, stem into intuition, like going, do I need to go to that party? My gut says no, I'm going to honor that. And, or do I take this role? My intuition, my gut's saying no. And we all have it. We don't understand it well enough, but, you know, the body gives signs. You know, if you're getting a fever, something's going on. But the throat example you give is brilliant. Am I not speaking up? Or did I say something that you know, that's so many different, it's like pretty basic, but also
contracting our expression.
Yes.
Which is again why muscle testing is a really good thing, because you can test, is it me, that many different levels. And what you were saying about like going to this party or what, like that whole thing, that's been a big thing for me because I have a lot of social anxiety, and which seems strange, I guess, to most people, but it's just I feel safe when I'm on a set because there's a controlled and purposeful intention, but just like going out into the world and being around a bunch of people, like because I have autism and it's something I don't enjoy, and it's difficult for me. And so one thing that I learned many years ago, it must have been 9-10 years ago, that has really been of service to me, this tool, is okay, so sitting down, calling on the light, getting really centered, and if I do or do not want to do something, I project okay, what would it look like if I went to back home for Christmas, right? Or whatever the example is. And I picture myself in doing that. And then I look to see, is my heart expanding or contracting?
Oh, I love that.
And is when my heart is expanded, do I experience enthusiasm? Right? And literally an enthusiasm to go. And whilst at the same time, and this starts getting pretty complex, but you'll get it. Where in my body am I feeling this coming from?
Cool.
And then muscle testing or checking inside myself, how long can I participate if I do choose to do this activity? How long can I participate in that in a way that I can stay in my loving? Is it 1 day, 2 day, 3? Like, you know what I mean? Like that. And and then, you know, the same thing, if like the heart is contracting, envisioning that, where is that coming from? Is it coming because of fear? Is it coming because I want to hide? Is it coming from that it's just not for the highest good of all concerned? You know, where is that coming from? So the more and more we do this, in my experience, the more nuanced and connected we are.
Yep.
And to me, that is true unconditional loving towards oneself and towards everything else. And you know, the body and the mind and the heart will want to speed things up and be like, this takes too long to do this, to check in. Like I should just be spontaneous. If I can't do that, then I'm not spontaneous. At least that's the kind of shit that runs through my head.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, sit down, homie. Like I told myself, like, sit down, check in, you know, and just see what it's about, because then that also leads us to another opportunity to work on these patterns, you know, on even a more specific way.
It's very multifaceted. Thank you for saying that. That's a lot of tools, and that can, you know, if someone thinks that we're being weird, yes, we're being weird, but we are doing it through a loving way. There are so many tools that. Oh,
no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. No, keep going. I looked down, so I didn't see. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say that, you know, these are great tools for one, and they can explore it if they want to, and it's just more about that body sign and being more, you know, intuitive within ourselves. And, you know, that to me has been a guiding light. And, you know, you also talk about it's not just necessarily love and light. Is there fear? Is there a negative thing? Is there, or how we perceive the negative things? So I think that's really important. What were you going to say?
Thank you for sharing that. I've been thinking a lot about prefacing, you know, lately, a lot. And, you know, when we first got on together and you're like, okay, no, I'm sorries. And I've been thinking a lot about apologies and I'm sorries and prefacing and the way that I actually silence myself by doing that, and not just trusting myself with prefacing like, I know this may seem weird, or this seems woo-woo, or whatever that is. I have said that stuff my whole life. You know, what we're talking about is our truth, and what we are talking about is scientifically proven.
Yeah.
That's why I love the program that I was in, you know, because it's not just some woo, it's scientifically proven, you know, and people can take what they want from that. And if we just allowed each other to express freely, you know, how we're feeling, that's not enforcing or telling people what they should believe or what they should do or whatever. And I think that a lot of times, in what I feel inside myself, is I'm afraid about how people are going to respond to this, because it may not be normal. And then like, oh God, she's a this or that, the other. But that's just intrusive. That's just intrusive thoughts. Again, that goes back to patterning, you know, and either we can share or not share. But I like to be in the business of sharing freely as much as I can, and not just for anyone else, but also for myself, because it helps me too.
Yeah, I think thank you. That's something that I've been working on. There's definitely, you know, some shame elements, which we all have, but also, you know, at the end of the day, it leads to you, me, everyone else's better life being as true as they can. Doesn't mean we need to share with everyone about, you know, all of the stuff going in our lives. Doesn't mean we need to be, you know, we can be vulnerable to the right people, but not feeling like we can't be ourselves, which is a journey for me, and I assume everyone.
Challenging.
Yeah. So
every day I'm thinking about the prefacing thing, and I'm trying to recorrect that thing, and I still am afraid of it.
Yeah, and
I'm so afraid. Like, even like that, this was running late, that my time was running late with you because of another thing that I was dealing with that was very important. My thought in my brain was like, oh my God, what is this person going to think? Is this person going to think that I don't respect their time? Is this person going to think that I'm unprofessional? Is this person going to think that, you know, like I this is just who I am in totality as a human being? Those were the thoughts that I had. Literally. And then I'm talking to Contessa, I'm like, make sure that he knows, like that like, and she's like, oh, Kevin's handling, and because I want to always over explain and make excuses when it's not just an excuse, it's the truth.
Yeah. You have
and
nothing.
I'm so afraid, you know?
You have nothing to worry about on my end. A comedian that I had on this podcast, he said something, you know, really interesting to me. He's all about that he doesn't feel the need to, he will apologize, but if he can't do something and it's not within what he wants to do, or there's something going in his life, he just says, I'm at capacity and I can't do it. And I thought that was so beautiful, because although we might be like, you know, the examples you gave, oh, why is this person not talking or communicating with me? At the end of the day, we need our glasses full before we can kind of help other people. And it was so interesting to also hear it in a different way, because it's not necessarily, you know, I speak more like how we're speaking, but he's just like, I'm at capacity and I can't do whatever the task is. I need to just work on it. It doesn't mean I'm not going to come back and do the task at hand, but I'm at capacity. And, you know, when you hear someone say I'm at capacity, you're like, yeah, that's great. You know, life happens. There's so much things happening. And it was just so beautiful, and it's so simple. It literally has changed my life. Although I don't present it in that way, but I'm way more, I wouldn't say forgiving, because I don't need to forgive anyone, but I'm way more understanding. You know, life happens, and it's empowering. We can all use that. I'm at capacity.
It's one of well, I need to pee first and foremost, and then I will come back and I want to talk about that, because
Okay,
what you're saying totally changed my life.
Awesome.
I think you'll really like this, because, you know, when you're talking about, like, when he said, I'm at capacity, and this is something that I've really been working hard on, you know, this mini comic book, and what it is, it's a way to share with people, you know, that are, if you're autistic or have ADHD, or even for people in general, right? Like in layman's terms, what it's like when you use all of your chips up cognitively. And I think it's a very important thing, you know, because the reason why I don't think, I know it's an important thing, is because most people don't understand, you know, the bandwidth or the capacity that other people have, right?
Yeah.
Has so many variations. And I think that I know that people need to know this stuff so that they can move into more compassion, you know?
100% agreed. Yes, it's very interesting, the capacity side. And then you talk about, what's the word, compassion. And, you know, kind of jumping the gun a bit, but I think this is kind of, you know, it's crucial. Early in your childhood, you were bullied. And I read this quote, if I can find it. You know, you were bullied at a young age, and, you know, everyone's been bullied to various degrees, but it sounds like it was quite horrific. All bullying is horrific. And then what you said, and I'm not advocating for bullying, I just want to preface this, as you know, we're talking about, I'm not advocating for bullying whatsoever, but I found this so interesting, and it kind of goes from your survive to thrive mentality, where you said it helped you with compassion and empathy, which, you know, a lot of people might not necessarily, and there's no judgment, no comparison, but a lot of people might not necessarily, obviously, we're not saying it's okay for that to happen, but being able to see a different side that potentially has helped you after going through something like that. Is there anything that springs to mind in terms of that? Because that's very, very intriguing to hear and see.
Yes, what I've learned through these experiences of bullying, you know, cycles of abuse within my life, are very radical and different things. And when I look at children, and I retrospectively looked at, like, okay, what was happening with them in their home? How were they growing up? What were they being taught? What weren't they being taught? I know from my own self that there were things that I just didn't have the support with. You know, I wasn't heard or seen many times in the way that I really needed. And so what that did for me is I felt smaller and smaller. So when I was in these situations of being bullied, I didn't know how to respond. And it was deeply confusing. And it didn't matter how many times I brought it up to my parents. They just thought it was like nothing. And it wasn't nothing. It was very much something. And so as I got older, I looked through the eyes of the kids that were doing these things, and thought about, okay, again, like, maybe they just need more hugs, and what was happening in their own private circumstances. And this is not an agreement to have kids torture another child, which is what I experienced. And I mean, I'm talking about hardcore things.
Oh, wow.
But starting to go to the root problem. And then for me, making an active decision to looking at that psychologically without spiritually bypassing. Because this is a big thing that I think a lot of people do and deal with. And I have my hand raised because this is one of the most important things that I've been really recognizing inside of myself the past few years. As I've been going through some, going through a divorce after I'm still married for almost 20 years. And through the majority of things in my life, when I talk about spiritual bypassing, it's when, as an empath, as myself, I'm so sensitive, and my craft of acting and writing and directing and producing inherently lends itself to that, right? So when I read something on a page from a character, right, when they're doing something terrible, I can't judge that character. Our job is to go back through the history and is why. Yeah. What were the needs of this character? Unfulfilled needs. What is the shadow when those needs are not fulfilled? It's a very intense process, but it's how we connect to the humanity within each person, right? So I inherently do that. In terms of spiritual bypassing, that's been complex for me. It is basically, like, my thesis was on forgiveness, and whether forgiveness can change someone, on a cellular level in terms of patterning and crystallizations and things like that. And my conclusion is that is true. However, cool. I've had a really hard time with believing in evil, or believing that people are truly consciously attempting to abuse hatred, and I'm talking about, it's very, very difficult to explain. So I'm like, okay, and it's not some the thing. It's when it's someone and people that love you that are doing that. And then you have a fractured reality. And in order to stand up for yourself is to create boundaries. And to create those boundaries means to look at something in a way that you never thought would ever be possible. And spiritual bypassing is using so much forgiveness and so many of the tools that, in a way, it can make us blind, because the part about being a spiritual warrior is a level of ruthlessness. And people think that ruthlessness is a negative thing, and it's not. It's about cutting away the fat of anything that is not true. And when you do the spiritual work and you're doing you're seeing a therapist, or talking to your friends and trying to get back to you, which takes a lot of work, it just sucks. It sucks to have to admit that that's true and reframe things. And how do you hold the peace in that? And how do you hold your loving in that? And how do you be oh, they're a motherfucker. They fucking suck and they're evil. That's a shitty thing to fucking have to say or to acknowledge, even though the person or the situation, again, and the circumstance is repeated all the time. It's hard for me to, it's hard for anyone to want to accept that, right? Because some part of my unconscious has been saying oh, if I accept the idea that this is actually true, then all the work that I've done will somehow be not true.
Yeah. I've been learning.
Very nuanced, but I think that people will get it, and you probably would get it.
I agree. I've been doing a course around self-awareness, which is all about, bringing it back to yourself. And one of the I think it was last week, I don't even know, but it was about spiritual bypassing. And
Really?
yeah, it's just because I haven't.
I thought it was like that word has been coming up in my brain. I've been talking about it a lot in therapy. I just felt like, so I want to hear that.
Yes, it is so fascinating to me because, I also write spiritual comedies where I bag spirituality, but, I'm obviously in that world because, there's, it's not all love and light as we say, but
No.
Yeah. And one of the things, I've done and other people do is if people are on that path, we can lose a lot of empathy. Oh, it's for their highest good or love and light, and
Yes.
we cannot actually connect to that person. And that's an element of spiritual bypassing where we can actually not feel what's going on. Oh, this person.
The crime,
Yeah.
because then that's not being of service to oneself or to the other person. It's just like, it can be like this emoji.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the spiritual version of the whatever emoji. Is that the whatever?
Yeah. It's really interesting because we do bypassing in general. There's also spiritual bypassing, but someone wronged us and, we need to feel it. We can let go, but we actually have to feel it because bypassing is not feeling it. And I spoke to, I'm very new to this, so it's very interesting. I think it's called German New Medicine. I spoke to someone actually yesterday, and one of the guys was talking about forgiveness. So I'd love to know your take on this. A lot of people are like, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. And he was saying that, that's actually worse because you're still carrying that anger.
So wait, in order to truly forgive, you have to forget.
Yes.
If you don't forget, then the forgiveness is not true forgiveness. And again, like when we're talking about spiritual bypassing, right? It's a trick. Like we have to, in a way, trick our own. It's like the Old Testament, like an eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth.
Yeah, I've never enjoyed that.
Yeah. And to truly forgive and forget does not mean that you don't carry the experience inside of you. It's just that it's letting it go and placing loving on it because now you've had the learning and the experience and you can move forward without judgment because you got what was needed from that experience. It's not letting someone off the hook. It's again, I keep saying in my experience, for me, to carry that pain is too much because then that person gets what they want.
Yep.
And to carry the pain and anger and the rage of a deliberate infliction or not deliberate infliction upon myself or to me or towards me, then it causes me too much anguish. And so I have to forgive myself for judging that person for hurting me. I forgive myself for judging myself for feeling stupid enough to even participate with that person. I forgive myself for judging myself for feeling stupid. I forgive myself for judging myself for not listening to this one moment. I forgive myself for judging myself for feeling frustrated that I have to do this forgiveness. I forgive myself for, you know what I mean? It's you go through the whole thing.
This is very important to me and, a lot of people that I talk about and, the audience as well. You've obviously explored it significantly within yourself and, tried a range of modalities and, we all have anger within us. It's natural. Are there any, also a loaded question, but are there any tools that have helped for you? Obviously the one you just gave is very empowering. Any things that, spring to mind?
Going back to what you were saying earlier about feeling something is absolutely fucking necessary. Because when I experience rage and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to push that and da-da-da, and then I'm going to just let that go through my art or my craft and I'm going to turn it into something beautiful. Yes, that's true. But if I don't acknowledge this fucking feeling inside of myself that's actually happening, then I'm pushing into denial. And the first law of spirit to me is acceptance. The second is cooperation. And how can I move into a cooperate? And then after that, then we can start making actionable choices. But if I don't accept the fact that I'm fucking angry, which I am today, to be honest, and feel very betrayed and very upset, if I don't acknowledge that, and I can say that to you without dumping on you energetically, right? Because it's about keeping the light around and understanding that the question came up for a reason, but I accept that I feel that way. Yeah. And so now, and I have been able to then move into a cooperation of like, okay, this is how you feel, James. And so what are the solutions? What are the next steps? And how can I do that in loving, in a way that's not going to continue to hurt me?
Yes. It's all about
knowledge and allowing ourselves to feel something. Like, I think that's a very, very important thing. And I hope people, like I keep encouraging myself, allow myself to feel the truth and acknowledge it. So then I can move into radical acceptance without denying what's happening with me, because that's what was happening with me, you know?
And, you know, these aren't, not that anyone will think this, but these aren't empty words. You know, you've first of all, you do it within yourself. But, you know, one thing that really, you know, I read this and I just, you know, I thought it was just so awesome. You've spoken about some of the significant negatives in the modeling world. And, you know, it's one thing to go over, you know, the abuse and some of the examples we've spoken about. One thing to go through that, which, you know, I hope it doesn't happen to anyone. But then to, you know, go on a journey of thriving. But then, you know, there's different layers. You correct me if I'm wrong. But then to come out and express this to the people with the intention of helping others, knowing full well that there's going to be a media storm, knowing that people are going to attack you. And I don't know, there would have been other stuff. Knowing that you were doing that, you know, for your truth and that you wanted to express to help, you know, the next person. You know, that's also part of the, you know, letting go, but also, you know, you've gone through your own journey and then, you know, putting your hand up. That's how we change the world. Is I've seen something or many things which is so fucked up, I'm not going to allow it. And, you know, that changes, you know, the consciousness of the planet. It changes industries. It changes people. So was that also kind of like the line of thinking, like something has happened and I'm going to bring awareness to it? Because it would be very scary to put your hand up and say that.
It was scary, and I had to live through that for so long. And there's a part of my spirit, not a part of me, like mostly my soul and my spirit is very much an activist, and it's bigger than me, dude. Like, it's not even like I'm like, let me change people's minds, or it's because that's scary shit.
Yeah,
you can lose jobs from it. The studios will be like, watch your mouth, don't join these political campaigns or get arrested, you know, in protests, you know, like and I do it because that is, if you see something that is wrong and you know it, and you can come from a place of love and say there's no more, then the collective community can change things. If we do not change the laws, which are necessary because we're obviously living on this planet, and without laws, it'd be absolute chaos. But when there's corruption, one must call it out. With the fashion industry, there's absolutely no fucking reason why children should be allowed to essentially be sex traded. You know, have photographs taken of them, and me on countless occasions for Italian Vogue, for all the famous magazines by famous photographers, and that's not child pornography.
Yeah. Except
like in any other occasion, it was. You know, that like, for instance, I love SAG-AFTRA so much, and I had said to CFD, I had said to the heads once I called this out in the New York Times magazine about what needs to be changed. They freaked out. Everyone freaked out. And I'm like, dude, all you have to do is take the SAG-AFTRA rules in terms of minors, where minors are not allowed on set, right? You don't even have to do the work. Just copy and paste.
Copy and paste, yeah.
You know? But no, the agents didn't want that. The industry didn't want that, because then they couldn't control in the same way. And so then I just keep doubling down, because what do I have to lose from it? What I would have to lose is my integrity. What I would have to lose from that is my integrity of knowing that I had a choice as a person that's in a position of power, and everyone is obsessed with proximity to power. I have no interest in having power. The only power that I want to do is to be able to assist in growth and upliftment and in change, and ideally with a community where we have each other's backs in doing that. And I mean, again, like with all of my politics, helping run campaigns, when it was not okay to do so, it was dangerous, being called into studios in their offices and being told to shut up, and, by people that are very prominent, being told to shut up. And I'm like, but what are you going to, well, I thought you loved me for this thing. And now that's going to impact your ticket sales or your, television views or whatever you think. Like, I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is what's happening, and I can't lie or deny that. And, even now in my own, with what I've been going through for the past 3 years, like, I'm just about, if something is not true, observe it, be mindful of it, be elegant about it, work through the stuff, and then be like, yo, no, this is illegal. This is wrong. It's wrong. It's not out of emotion. It's not out of, it's not, it stops coming from an emotional place, but a practical place. And then I start to see where the suffering is. Whether it's BLM or whether it's sex trafficking or whether it's domestic violence or rape, or, I mean, I can go on and on and on. Like, my life is very much dedicated to being of service in those ways. And again, it's not easy. It's super scary.
Yeah, you have a target on your back for people that are scared, worried, want to attack, and more. And, people, unfortunately, and I do this, when we don't agree with someone, we can forget about all the 99,000 amazing things in our mind that they do. Then there's the one thing where it challenges our belief system, and then we don't like that person anymore. And that's not okay. It's something, I'm actively working on. Everyone's got different, in these examples, everything you've done is amazing, but let's just pretend where you've done something and we don't like. You're like, okay, Jamie's done this, and this, and the list goes on. And then we see the one thing and we're like, whoa, I won't allow that, or that's horrible. And we're like, no, everyone's got different belief systems. Everyone I've ever met is trying to do the right thing. They just might come about it a different way to us. It might not be in alignment with our values, but we can't, to me, I think that's actually one of the most important things is, we got to realize that not everyone has our life experiences and our belief systems and all of that. And we can't attack people, including like me attacking people, just because of potentially one thing that we don't like. And often it's basically out of fear. It's not even those things anyway.
And our projection. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think without integrity, as you said, what do we have? What I just want to
like to get very speaking about nuance, and what I've really been working on the past few years is like when you stated, and I can't say it word for word, but that people are not coming from what did you say? Negative intention.
Like a negative intention. They're trying potentially to do it through their belief systems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I believe that. And I used to believe that 100%. And well, the reason why I've been, really working on exploring spiritual bypassing is because I have a really hard time with not believing that 100%. And yet I've had to start accepting that some people are not doing things because of something good.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's not just a disconnect, but a strategic intention to continue the behavior, to continue to break law, to continue to create oppression, suppression, isolation, to divide in every way, shape, or form, and that know how to prey upon people that have good intentions.
Yeah.
And that, people that are unwilling to cross the aisle. So much of the division and the hatred in this country and globally is because of people's unwillingness to speak to one another. And I have really, really, really had to accept that some people are just not. And through all of my research, through all of my acting, through all of my crafts, through all of my studies, through all of the things, and people will be like, well, why is this person doing this thing? What does that person want? Or what does that group want? And through all of this exploration, it's ineffable. Because sometimes people just want to enslave others. Sometimes people just want to abuse. Sometimes people just want things the way that they want it. And it's just a game. And we try and fix it because as human beings, we're problem solvers, right? And we don't want to believe what we know, that atrocities are occurring every single day, but we don't want to actually, like for me, actually believe that there's that level of strategy and intent, because my nature is the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
But to not accept it would be a lack of maturation on my point of view. And it's not a fun area to have to delve into, to speak about, or to delve into within my own heart. But I'd be extremely remiss if I wasn't willing to go into those areas, because I can't uplift anyone else if I'm not willing to see that some people just don't want to be conscious, and some people do truly want to hurt.
Agreed. And looking at that, which is extremely scary and can also be life-threatening, there's definitely psychopaths and extreme narcissists out there. Also from my end is definitely not the bypassing of that, is that the vast majority of people we come across, they genuinely mean well. They're definitely people that do horrific things, and you can see that there's a disconnect, as you said. There's just something gone horribly wrong. Where I come from is to try. It doesn't mean sweeping it on a rug. There is that stuff there, but the vast majority of people in my life or that I interact with, whether they're doing the good fight, they mean well. They might not go about it
I
best.
100% agree. And that's why it's been like, everything is a test, right? So all these things are tests, because I agree with that, wholeheartedly. And then you'll have a person or a faction or a group that it's so hard to when you realize, oh, it's not, and I'm being overly empathetic, and they're utilizing that to hurt me.
Yeah.
They're utilizing these things to hurt, a community of people. And that's, again, like, it sucks to say this out loud because it's not fun, because I know that you and I share the same beliefs. But if we are truly, for me, if I am truly to, be here of full service, I am concerned about, again, and spiritually bypassing, I'm concerned about, by accepting that everyone is inherently good, even though that's what I have fully believed, what am I missing out for other people? You know, like what am I silencing or ignoring, you know, on these very fine, like in these very, like in the nooks and the crannies of people's experiences?
And I need to dive.
It's an existential question.
Yes,
And it's not
that's
existential, but it's also a very practical question. And like, definitely like is very hard. And I don't mean to be like a drag.
no, definitely not. No, it's
Because
these are
it comes from a place of loving. Like
Yep.
what I'm sharing comes from my dedication to loving and service, you know? It's not to hurt anybody or to disregard this belief that the two of us have, or, you know, shared experience that ultimately going back, like when we were talking about bullying and how I could see through the eyes of those kids and, you know, how I've operated my whole life. And there's always another opportunity to keep learning, even when it feels really uncomfortable.
that's where the growth is.
And
Unfortunately, sometimes.
spirit, yeah, it is, and it's tough, right?
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. But I believe that spirit is here to disturb the comfort and to comfort the disturbed.
Agreed. Through my growth, it's always been through things that you never want, you know, to getting out of that comfort zone. Before we wrap up, let's do a rapid fire segment.
Okay.
Say that again.
Let's do it.
Oh, awesome. So, you know, please take your time. These are never rapid. And yeah, ready to rumble. What has been your special ingredient to work all these years?
Perseverance.
What's your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
Be with my children.
What are you most proud of?
My children.
What keeps you in a positive mindset when things perhaps aren't going great?
My gratitude, again, for my children, my gratitude that I get to do what I love. And even if I'm rejected, you know, if I want some job or something and I can't have it, it's still my gratitude to be able to, again, to be of service. That's a big thing for me. Yeah.
How do you cope with the rejection? Because in this industry, you get way more no's than you get yeses.
By continuing to study.
It sounds like, you know, the craft in life as well on your end as well. Yeah. Do you have any regrets?
The times where I haven't, where I fight and naturally do so for other people in a way that is so important to me, and sometimes not having the strength to do that for my own self.
What would you do if you knew you cannot fail?
Well, that's an interesting quote. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? I think I keep doing the same thing because, I mean, to know that you cannot fail would to be a terribly boring life.
Very interesting.
No, really, like it'd be like, if you can't fail at something, then something has no meaning. The things that have meaning are things that you can't possess or own or control, right? So if I knew that I could not fail, I mean, I could go on a tangent about, you know, grandiose things, but I think it would be that'd be sad to me because I know that's not aligned with the human condition. We cannot have meaning if we don't know the opposite.
Ooh. How has your view of success changed over the years?
When I always felt, especially when I transitioned into well, not actually, yeah, when I was younger and then transitioning into filmmaking, I was essentially taught that the minute that I had one success, right? Let's say I got Pearl Harbor, right? And then it'd be like I'd be in the trailer for Pearl Harbor, and the agents would be calling me like, okay, we got to ride this momentum. We got to ride this momentum. You got to do this. So it was never, I wasn't like taught to allow myself to even take in the moment of being proud of myself. And I did this interview with one of my favorite journalists. His name is Michael Haney. And he taught me something really important, because he called me out and he's like, why do you do this thing? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, why is it that when I ask you a question, you start to share the story, you will stop and give credit to someone else?
Wow.
Like, why can you not understand that you're an icon? Why can you not say your successes out loud? Like, why are you, giving it away? And that was in 2019. And that really taught me a lot about how important it is that we all acknowledge ourselves in any small or big triumph. Even if you just get up and your heart is beating and you're breathing, that's a triumph. That's a success. If you tied your shoes that day, that's a success. And it's taking those things in. And so my experience of success, the way I relate to it, the main way I relate to it is through that experience, and also that I am now in the position to give other artists an opportunity to share their truth when they have been overlooked or not seen. Being a producer is one of the most extraordinary things, because I get to hire artist, crew, cast members based on their actual talent, not based on how famous they are or this or that, the other, but who is best to tell this story. And my God, I've been so blessed throughout my career, from the multiple people that I can name that saw that in me. And that's all I really ever wanted, not just for myself, but for others. So that to me is success.
That's amazing. I love shared success in that, you rise together. It's beautiful. It's a nice, abundant mindset. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Yes. I'm often very much in fear, even like the first day that I step on set, right? Or on a stage or whatever it is. And I consistently question myself, like, okay, why am I so afraid? What is going on? I've done this for so long. And then I realized through some of the most important actors, whether it's the Pacinos or I can go on and on in the world, that they're like, of course you're afraid, because it means something. It means something. Fear is a false expectation appearing real. The other advice I would state is that fear has the same response physiologically in the body as excitement. So sometimes it requires us to be like, okay, I'm really afraid, and maybe this is excitement. It's all practical advice, but on like an immediate thing, lean into the things that make you, that you feel fear towards stepping into, that matter to you. Like, lean into it and be gentle with it, and think about how you would feel if you didn't lean into it at all.
Nice. Do you have a poetry book?
Many.
Go on. I think I heard or read that there was one about affirmation. So do you do a lot of poetry?
I do a lot of poetry.
That is very cool. Is this for you? Is this a way of exploring yourself?
Yes, I have done it since I was very, very little.
Would you publish it to the world if you haven't already?
Yes. The first time I talked about it publicly, I think, was with Jimmy Kimmel. And my mom had found my first poetry book was called The Best Poems in the Galaxy.
That's cool.
And I think it was about 6.
Yeah.
And so he and I were like, reading that. That was the first time I really publicly.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I'll have to look into that. That's great.
But I mean, with poetry, it's always been, for me, something that's so sacred that I didn't want it to be criticized. And then I realized that I'm like, that's like I'm withholding a gift that I have that should be shared. And so, yes, I'm going to be releasing a book this year, which I've not told anybody. So it's kind of weird to say that.
That is so exciting. Congratulations. Please let me know and we'll let everyone know. That's awesome.
But I've written, yes, many books and not under my name.
Oh, even interesting. Is that
That's all I'm going to say.
say that again?
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay. Before we go and I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you, what is the one question I should have asked you?
I have no answer for that because the reason why I really wanted to do this podcast is because I'm such a big fan of yours. And
Thank you. That warms my heart.
really. And the level of consciousness and awareness that you have, and how specific it is, you know, and how safe it is and inviting it is to explore areas to uplift people, right, in a very meaningful way. And the questions go into areas that are extraordinarily joyful and sometimes really intense, but it's not because of your intent to do that, right? It's because of the safety that the person that you're interviewing feels to go there with you. When you ask a question, I immediately feel the safety to explore my own self, right? And explore those very scary areas and then put it out there into the entire world.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, what I mean, that's like the greatest risk per se, which is also not the greatest risk, because the greatest risk is to silence yourself and to have someone holding that space and asking the questions that with nothing but honest, true intent of learning and expansion and growth and sharing with other people is really fucking rare. And I think I've experienced that maybe 3 other times in my life. And so I really appreciate you.
Oh, I've got tears in my eyes. Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it takes two to tango, and you know, this has been beyond a delight. Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and all of that cool stuff?
I have an Instagram. It's at Jaime, JAIME _King, KING. So at Jaime_King. And that's the same thing as my Twitter handle. I don't really use Twitter anymore. And yeah, that's my main motive.
We will put that. Sorry, go on.
Following of my social media.
We will put that in the episode notes so people can check you out. Thank you. You are thank you. Yes, we're both bowing to each other. I appreciate you coming to the table, expressing yourself, the love that you bring, and the truth-seeking nature, which is, you know, why I do this podcast. Very empowering. The list goes on. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this.
God bless you. Thank you.
One of the many takeaways is that Jaime defied expectations that were put on her and chose to do what she loved and wanted, regardless of all the people who said she couldn't. This was due to her high integrity and knowing that she wanted to be of service. Without integrity, what do we have? This is something I've been pondering since our chat. We don't need to fight all the causes, put our hands up to save the world, but what we do need is integrity. And knowingness inside of us that highlights our values, rights, and wrongs. To stand up for what's right for us. To simply say no to all which is not in alignment with our core values or that which doesn't work for us. Often we can bypass our integrity due to low self-esteem, wanting to fit in, or fear of being judged or persecuted. Little do we know that often others will share our values, but at the same time are also scared to reveal them. It is my firm belief that if we all stand in our power with compassion and love, and of course integrity, then we can change the world. It all stems from within us first. Jaime gives the brilliant example of how she stood up against an empire, the fashion industry, knowing full well that she would be a target and that it would be an immense challenge. However, despite the fear, she ultimately realized that her actions would help an entire industry, which is mind-blowing. Jaime knows that her integrity has ruled her actions. This is beyond empowering to me. My takeaway is that we don't need to fight all the world battles. We can start small, like setting a boundary with a loved one, and it is ultimately through these actions that we change our reality and the world around us. I'll leave you with this epic quote. Integrity gives you a real freedom because you have nothing to fear since you have nothing to hide. Zig Ziglar.
Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.